Sorry?
We're on live stream.
Okay. Welcome. And this Economic and Environment Overview Scrutiny Committee. Before I start, good morning, welcome. This is the meeting of the Economic and Environment Overview Scrutiny Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting using the link on the agenda. Thank you. We have apologies. Joyce Barrow, Chair, as I'm as Vice Chair. She's Councillor Barsley standing in for Joyce. Julian Dean, Julia Evans is standing in for Julian. And Paul Wynne, Peggy Mullet, thank you, Peggy, is standing in for Paul. Disclosed interests, we all know about this. Members are reminded they must declare and disclosable pecuniary interests and other non-registrable interests. We all know that. Any problems with that? Nope. Minutes of the previous meeting. You've all got those? Proposed. Seconded.
I was there. So.
Okay, thank you. Public question time. I don't believe we've got any
Public questions.
No public questions. Thank you. Members' question, and I believe we haven't got any questions. And so we go straight into the one agenda for this meeting, the draft waste minimisation strategy. And I think it's Mark and Jane, whichever way around you want to take it, and would present this strategy.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me. Just to introduce this, really, although I'll then turn immediately to Mark, who is the expert in this, but this is intended to be a means by which we reduce the quantity of waste produced by households in Shropshire, because we are aware that the progress that has been made previously in recycling and composting performance has started to slow down, and we're now in a situation where we actually have a really high level of waste per household in the county, and that does come at a cost to the council that we can no longer afford. Added to that, anticipated housing growth is only going to boost those costs even more. So it's a really key point for us to take action, to pull together this strategy and to start to implement an approach that will limit our waste arisings from households. And hopefully the council financially in so doing, as well as having some really good recycling outcomes, so for environmental reasons as well. If I can hand over to Mark now, he will give you the detail of how we would like to do that, and hopefully then be able to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, Chair and Committee. And should start by saying thank you for sort of allowing this additional meeting just to look at this particular item. Appreciate the timing schedule, and also commend members for proposing the motion and unanimously supporting it. It's been a very interesting and insightful piece of work to do. Although I've worked in waste in Shropshire 20 years, it's only when you really look at an issue in fine detail that you understand where the issues are arising. And for many years, we've known that Shropshire Council has a high quantity of waste. It's high for our SITFA group, it's high regionally and high nationally. And we've all had a feeling for why that may be, but the analysis that's been done in preparation for this strategy has helped to highlight that. And so particularly draw your attention to the graph on page 6 of your report. That very clearly sets out Shropshire's waste quantities divided across the waste streams that we produce. So the first bar is the recycled stream, which is our paper and card, which goes in our blue sack, our cans and plastics that go into the purple lidded bin. The next section is the garden waste, and the next section is residual waste. So we are higher for our recycled content compared to averages. I've made some analysis as to what our guesstimates really as to why that may be. We have as you know, we have an elderly demographic in Shropshire. I think there's a feeling that people are still buying printed media compared to buying and consuming online. I think our sort of rural and sparse nature means that people are more inclined to drink at home rather than go to the local pub because they're a distance away. So households are producing more cans and bottles at home. But the big standout factor is the garden waste. So 87% higher for our garden waste arisings compared to national averages. And it's not just because Shropshire are keen gardeners. Over the page on page 7 of the report, there's a breakdown of the housing type that we have in Shropshire. So Shropshire has the highest proportion of detached dwellings and semi-detached dwellings compared to our SIPFA near neighbours. And so all those kind of properties come with gardens. So if you're in a detached property, you may have a wraparound garden around it. Even a semi, you could well have a large garden of your own. And also we have the very low number of flatted properties which typically don't have gardens. So there's good reasons why we're generating so much garden waste, but that is by far the biggest cause for Shropshire having high waste arisings. The strategy is sort of divided across 5 sort of sections. There's a lot of history and data and analysis to begin with to understand why we've got high waste quantities and the nature of that waste. So there's various pie charts which break down the composition of waste in Shropshire. And then on page 23 of the strategy, what I've done with a table there is put all of those analysis that's been done over the years side by side. And what that enables us to do is sort of track changes. So we can see that paper and card or newspapers particularly is a smaller, is a reducing waste stream. Food waste is one of the sort of highest, types of waste for all households, and food waste is sort of divided across what we call unavoidable food waste. So this is your pips and peelings and stones from fruit and vegetables. No matter what we do as intervention, we'll always have that type of waste to deal with. But a big portion of it is what we call avoidable food waste. So this is stuff that people buy from the supermarket, and for whatever reason, it's not consumed in time, and so it gets spoilt. It'll go off in the fridge and get wasted, or families cook too much, and things like rice and pasta particularly are very difficult to portion size, so quantities get wasted. So they'll just cook too much in the first instance, and people have lost those skills a little bit about how to store stuff that's being cooked and cool it down and freeze it for subsequent meals. So the first sort of part is about how do we address the organics fraction, and that's garden waste and food waste combined. When I started to draft this strategy, the proposal to charge for garden waste that decision hadn't been made. It subsequently come to pass, and as of this week, we started to charge for garden waste. And sort of policies like that will help us drive down the quantity of waste that we're collecting. So there'll be some households that, for whatever reason, will not subscribe to the service, and will either have to take their waste to the HWRCs or deal with it differently within their own property. So a big plank of the strategy is looking at how we encourage households to home compost. I mean, that's by far and away the best way to deal with garden waste. Get people composted at home. It avoids the vehicles collecting it, and it means we haven't got to pay for the collection or pay for the treatment of it. And so the strategy sort of crosses over 5 areas: the data analysis, the policy, and there's a bit about the policies that we have in place already, the communications and what we may do differently, and then the actions. So the strategy proposes a 20% reduction in total waste over the life of the strategy. So that's from 2024 to 2025. And there's 10 actions behind that will help drive that sort of behaviour change and policy change to reduce the quantity. And then at the back of the strategy, there are sort of a number of case studies, because although we've got high quantities of waste in Shropshire, and it's been a while since our last strategy sort of lapsed in 2015, stuff has been happening in the background, and initiatives that started then, like the furniture schemes and so on and so forth, they still continue today. So it's looking about how do we scale up the kind of interventions that we've got already, and where do we replicate them elsewhere in the county. So we've got good furniture schemes in Shrewsbury, but actually there are pockets in the county that aren't served by such a facility. So that's sort of a broad sort of overview of the strategy and report. And I think we've not touched on the sort of recommendations in the report. Initially, it's to do with approving the report, but following the briefing we had earlier this week, I think what we're asking committee to do is to support the strategy, which is in its draft form. So consider the report. If you're happy with the strategy, support the strategy for the next leg of its journey for subsequent adoption. That's the report and the strategy. I mean, there's 50 odd pages there. We're going to go through sort of page by page, but
Okay.
Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ronald. Jane, thank you. Okay, questions. And question for me to start with, I think. It's not the council that are charging, Veolia are charging more because we're creating more green waste. So what is Veolia's annual spend, or what's the recharge to us per annum now?
It's about 40 million gross.
Yeah.
We get revenues from the sale of energy, which we get a share of,
Yeah.
and we get a share of recycled revenue. So I think in broad net terms, it's around 34-35 to the local authority.
So basically, Veolia have come to us to say we need more money because of all the reasons you just spelled out. Yeah.
I mean, each time a new property gets built in Shropshire, and that's another property for viewers in service, and there's an indexation that allows for new builds. Yeah. And each new property generates a new quantity of waste that has to be dealt with. And even if we had no growth in population or housing numbers or waste, the contract value is indexed annually as well.
Rob.
So kind of following on from that point, really, my question is about planning and how we can use planning to reduce waste. I think you said that we've got an issue because we have a large number of semi-detached and detached houses. I'd say every single house that's being built in Shrewsbury right now is on a large new build estate with gardens and everything else that's causing it. Why are we not moving towards a more gentle density in our urban town centres? So more mansion blocks, more apartments. That gets more people into our town centres for economic reasons. Also, I imagine that would help in terms of waste minimisation. Also, in terms of planning, what are we doing about things like drive-throughs? There's a huge increase in drive-throughs now where people get takeaway cups, takeaway packaging. Are we actually using all the levers we have within the planning system to prevent that from happening? Because that would be a concern for me. Like I've never seen so many drive-throughs everywhere. You can drive through to get almost anything now. So planning for housing, or the planning for particularly drive-throughs, but other areas, how can we leverage that?
I think probably what you mean is just infrastructure. Same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think there's some very pertinent points there. In the past, I think almost prior unitary, Some of the district councils had planning policies in place. I know Shrewsbury Action did, whereby every new build property was required by the developer to install a compost bin at that property and a water butt. And I think some of those policies have fallen by the wayside more recently. I mean, and that would be a way of the developer paying for that sort of infrastructure rather than the householder. And if it's there and there at the onset when they move in, then it's a sort of behavioural change to get used to when you start at the new property. I think that's worth revisiting again in sort of a broader sort of policy piece. So take the point about the kind of the sort of street litter and the volume of waste that ends up in our street bins from drive-throughs and fast food on the go. Yes, there's that's sort of beyond the scope of here. Sort of touch on the kind of planning side of it, but I think what I can say to sort of address the big sort of fast food outlets are changing the material that they provide to their customers. So they're moving away for brand and reputational reasons from sort of single-use plastics. So a lot more of the sort of packaging that you get from these fast food outlets is cardboard based rather than polystyrene based. So it's it's more readily permitted into our recycling schemes, and it's biodegradable, so it's not sort of causing the sort of street litter sort of issues.
I don't imagine that's going into our recycling stream, is it? It's going the waste into bins. So I think through you, Chair, I think unless it's explicitly in here and I've missed it, I think the use of planning to try and reduce waste needs to be somewhere in there.
I could expand on that, but I agree with you. Yeah. Right, okay. Jane and Gary, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just picking up on the point referenced there about the potential to build more mansion blocks, apartments, town centre living, that sort of thing. It's a really good point, and it does connect with the big town plan thoughts for Shrewsbury, which does include the potential to put larger residential blocks in the town centre. And there's lots of good reasons to do that in terms of having a very walkable town centre, people not needing to drive everywhere, having access to all sorts of services and opportunities in the town centre, but also it's a really good point. That's also then the kind of accommodation that doesn't bring with it large gardens with lots of garden waste provision, etc. So just to assure you, that is exactly the sort of thing we're looking at. In addition to the Shrewsbury big town plan, we're also looking at market towns, the revitalisation of market towns, and again a similar concept there, that there are opportunities for things like flats over shops and town centre conversions of retail and other buildings that are no longer being used for their original purpose. So I think that also kind of feeds into the sort of point that you were making, which absolutely agree with.
Thank you. Gary?
I think it was just going back to the point about Viola and they want more money. It's indexed in the budget for them. Their costs, the money we give them goes up every year based on the fact that we expect our housing portfolio to expand by a certain percentage. But it's a double-edged sword. We're giving them more money, but we're also getting more money in. Yeah. For every house we build, a basic council tax is getting up to £2,000. Of that, probably £500 of that would be for waste collection. So we're making £1,500 profit on every house we build. So the idea of the indexation was that Viola would get paid extra each year. So they come back now and ask for more on top of that. So they want the cake not eat it. And the other question I want to bring up is, there's mention of £1 million profit in here with the mineralisation, with the green bin charging. But it doesn't allow for the fact that a quarter of people probably aren't going to pay the green bin licence. They're going to recycle the waste in their own gardens. And that in itself, just putting the charge on, should be accounted for in the document. The fact that people will recycle their own garden waste in their own properties, and therefore our volume will reduce because of that.
Or the wrong bin. Mark, do you want to read?
Yeah, I mean, the couple of points there. I mean, the just share with members actually the number of subscriptions that we've had already. So the scheme for the garden waste collections only launched on Monday this week, and the figures as of 8:30 this morning were that 12,482 subscriptions have been received. That's from 11,920 properties. So what that's telling me is some properties have had taken out more than one subscription. So if they were already had, a second or third bin, they're having to pay that subscription for them. So, I mean, that's brought in just shy of 700,000 already this week alone. I think what I'd like to express here a little bit as well is those are sort of individual property subscriptions. We're aware that some properties, may not have sufficient or as much garden as is required to maybe warrant a subscription of their own. And what we are saying is that we will allow households to sort of, club together collectively to take out a subscription between 2 or 3. So if they've got smaller gardens and they think a collection will work shared between 3 of them, that's a route into into receiving that service. So everyone's means are different, so we need to sort of accommodate for the fact that some people can't afford the service and may choose not to. And we have a sort of home composting support service through the Shropshire Master Composters, so we can give kind of one-to-one support to these households that don't take out a subscription about how you go about buying a compost bin, how you may site it in your garden, give them some advice on how to do it correctly so you can make compost quickly, and give people a bit of a helping hand really to go down that route. So reducing the garden waste does save cost, and I know we've introduced a service to generate subscriptions, but actually environmentally as well as there are economic factors, there are some benefits to people composting at home.
Thank you. Ed and Ned, and then Julia.
Thank you, Chairman. Just really to support what Rob was saying just now, it does seem to me that there needs to be more of a connect between not just this scrutiny committee, but all scrutiny committees and planning. A few months ago, Peggy will remember this, we had a discussion about adult services, and the point that was made by the executive director was that there are plenty of beds in Shropshire for elderly people. It's just they're in people's homes, rather than where they might otherwise be. But I'm not sure that the communication goes back to the planning service in the way that we might like. And I'm not sure I agree with everything Rob has said, but I think the principle that scrutiny committees should have an impact on planning policy is a very sound one indeed. Because if you build houses that are capable of home composting, in our instance, or thinking of Peggy's scrutiny, build houses that are capable of taking a granny flat or a room for the family to look after their elderly relative. That is absolutely common sense and reduces costs down the line. I'm not sure what Mark quite meant when he said it was beyond the scope of this committee to consider planning. I thought it was absolutely within the scope of this committee to send a message to planning policy. Perhaps I misunderstood.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the scope of the waste prevention plan to draw in specific planning policies. Yeah, what the committee decides to do is a matter for itself.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Julia.
Ed.
Oh, Ed. Sorry, Ed. I'm listening. Sorry, I by the way, Ed's got to leave early.
Yeah,
so
just a quick one. We've already sort of mentioned an older demographic in Shropshire. I'm just thinking about recycle, reuse, and the growth in social media, particularly around things like Facebook Marketplace. Vintage is hugely popular. Anyone who's on TikTok will notice that people who go car booting and getting bargains and turning that into profit is quite popular. How are we capturing what's going on in Shropshire, and how are we encouraging that recycle, make, do, amend, reuse, repair shop, all those sort of things?
So you're absolutely right. We need to be more switched on to what's going on around us through social media, and we have an extensive network of sort of furniture reuse in the county. At the back of the report, I've referenced the Shrewsbury Furniture Scheme and Home Essentials. That's a long-standing operation. They've got a retail outlet on in Castle Foregate, and they've got a unit in Monkmore. So there's elements of particularly furniture and larger use items that are being reused in the community. I think what I'm advocating for in the strategy is that we replicate that kind of model in places where there may be gaps. We also have the repair cafes, and again in the strategy, in the case studies, I've referenced the Ludlow Repair Cafe. It's been going for a number of years. So this is an opportunity where if you've got a exposed to a home that's stopped working, you may not have the skills yourself to get it working again. You turn up there on one of their advertised days, you bring in your item, and there'll be somebody there, hopefully, who is skilled to repair that item and get it back into service for you. And in some cases, it may be as simple as a fuse needs replacing, but there's that kind of facility out there, and the kind of number of those repair cafes is growing in Shropshire. So I think that one of the more recent ones has been interested in Broseley, but again, the drive for this is how do let's map where these operations are taking place and identify the gaps, help them promote what they're doing, and plug in, try and find community leaders to set one up in their own patch.
Thank you. Just sorry, Chair, if I could just come back on that. Just I think it's might be something Shropshire Council could do. It could be something to do with the voluntary sector about having a directory. And I think we all see on our local social media pages someone after a washing machine repair person. People don't know where to look to find the skills to help repair things, and instead they just go out and buy a new one, which then creates, basically white goods particularly. It might be worth approaching the voluntary sector to try and compile a directory for Shropshire of where you can go for repair cafe. People that can sort your problems and reduce waste.
Indeed, and we've got the men in sheds as well around most of all. So that it does actually. You're quite right. Thank you. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, but that's absolutely right, and I see that as an element of this strategy. Let's compile this directory and a mapping exercise. I'll also say that sort of coming down to the policy line nationally is a motion called right to repair. So we've all perhaps bought items in the past where once they fail, you can't get the component that needs replacing without specialist tools or so on and so forth. But there's a push nationally to make goods more easily repairable, and put the onus on the manufacturers to design and manufacture these goods in such a way that facilitates that.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, Ed, welcome to my world. We do have a Shrewsbury Repair Cafe, and it was in the Riverside. And I don't know where they've moved to, but they do exist. They were in the United Reform Pitch not too long ago. There's a few points I want to make in the report. And the reduction in garden activity, how are we going to do that? And with people with small gardens, like myself, and I have a home composting bin and I do use it. When it's full, what do I do? All I can see is that kitchen waste is just going to go into general waste. And we're talking about having sight of what to do, education. People don't know, and I think we are the best place to have an oversight of what is going on, and a signposting page where you can say what to do if this happens, where to look if this happens. And that we were talking about this with buses, it's the same sort of thing. We are the place where people look first. Voluntary sector within it, and don't always have oversight of it. A lot of the evidence in the report is anecdotal, and we need more basis, more data on it. Bin sizes, we have 240 litres. I have neighbours who have 2 of these bins and they use them. you know, they're full every time. We need to re-educate people on better recycling. All very well to say that, you know, we're doing well. You know, we do have a lot of waste, but the Western Europe is the second largest waste producer in the world. You know, the richer the country, usually the more waste, and we need to look at that. So are we going to look at smaller bins for new builds, the 180 litres, to encourage less waste? We're cutting funding to the community organisations. Is this a short-term saving and a long-term cost to the council? And is this, do we have a cultural change programme? Is that needed on that? We have no new funding. We have no clear targets on the composting. You know, how is that actually going to look like? How are we going to encourage people to do it? Less garden activity. How are we going to do that? Is that concreting gardens? Is that saying, I mean, great for no mow May, but how are we going to do that? Are we discussing the risks of fly tipping? Because we're restricting access to the recycling. I know it's an appointment thing, but people are less likely to use that, and we're charging for the green waste. Dudley and Wrexham are only charging £36 and £35 per bin annually. Why are we charging so much more? And it's access. After this meeting, I'm going to a constituent who cannot access the charging facility that they want. They can't get through on the phone because it's so busy. People are waiting 25, 30 minutes to get through. We haven't considered other options, like stopping winter collections rather than charging. We haven't discussed charging the green waste. You know, the charging for the green waste and the appointments for recycling was put in before the draft minimalisation was published. And there's no equality impact assessment of this policy. And I think Ian will be sick of me saying, if you look at the UN sustainability goals, we should be putting them by everything we do. And one is the impact to the community. What impact is this going to have? Thank you.
Leave you with that one, Mark.
There's obviously clearly a lot in there, and I think some of those aspects are sort of, you know, beyond, you know, the policies that have been put in place already. Like there is already an agreed charge for the garden waste collection service. That decision's been made and implemented. I'll come back to the point about how do we reduce the actual garden waste, and I'll say that prior to garden waste collections being provided, there was far less garden waste generated from households. I think when we put the green bins in place, it actually encouraged, incentivized households to fill them. And so, you know, prior to having green bins, and people were more, you know, familiar with dealing with garden waste within their own sort of garden. It was called the dash for grass within the kind of industry. It was driven by performance targets rather than environmental benefit, really. So I think by introducing the charge, that will change behaviours to get people to think differently about how they what they do with their garden waste. There's a sort of cultural change. It's very small and slow, but you know, the no mow May is sort of, you know, gathering interest, and people are more aware of it. It's something we've started to adopt within our sort of Shropshire highway network, and there's good, you know, cost and environmental reasons for allowing some of these sort of flowers to grow and cutting them at the right time of year. I mean, I've done my own sort of experiments at home whereby I've got a lawn. And if I mow that lawn every week, it generates more grass than if I leave it to grow and cut it at the end of the season. And every time you cut your lawn, it's promoting new growth because the grass wants to, you know, set new seeds and sort of propagate itself. So just those changes reduce the kind of quantity of garden waste that you're generating.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Right. My answer to Julia would have been, I'd like to have seen somebody from Veolia here, but we have the cabinet member who will have all the answers. So we're lucky there. Alan, Nick Hignett.
Yeah, we've got an awful lot of benchmarking data here. What we don't have, and I haven't seen it, is benchmarking of our costs and the charges that Veolia make on us compared to other areas. I mean, this whole strategy is based around reducing costs. Do we have any idea about whether we are getting conned or ripped off by Veolia in comparison with what's happening in other areas? I do recollect that we did last year have a transformation test and finish, and Roger was the chair of that. And one of the things we did was to interview PricewaterhouseCoopers about the sort of work that they were doing. And they did emphasise that they're expecting to make significant savings from renegotiating the Veolia contract. So the major question is, has that work of PricewaterhouseCoopers, has that been followed up? Have they come up with anything? Have we really got a tight contract on this? Because the point that PricewaterhouseCoopers is making is that some of the negotiations in the initial phases of the contract, we meaning Shropshire Council, were rather naive in not having the expertise and the depth of knowledge to negotiate a contract that was more than satisfactory. So what's happening? Have we gone back to Veolia at all? Have they gone back to Veolia? Is there anything coming out from those further discussions with Veolia? And are we getting a reasonable deal from Veolia as a result of this contract?
Just to cover some basic points on this, but also bring in Jane, because I know Jane's been involved most recently in discussions with Veolia about negotiation of the contract. So we have done that sort of benchmarking work with PwC, and some of the outputs from that we're still waiting on to an extent. It's very difficult to compare exactly like for like, because each local authority provides a service in a different way, has different demographics and so on and so forth. What we are paying for, and a big composite part of the unitary charge, is for the build of the energy recovery facility. So that large capital cost, the repayment of that is built into our contract. So once we've gone through the end of, and I don't think this is kind of always well understood, when we've gone through the end of the contract, that capital asset as it stands now will be Shropshire Council's. So our collection costs and treatment costs going forward will be far less at the end of the contract, because we've paid for those major pieces of capital infrastructure. Jane, are you, if I bring you in, you've had that most with Veolia?
By all means. So yes, to confirm that we are talking to Veolia about the contract. It is a PFI contract. It's one that locks us in for a long period of time, and obviously negotiated some years ago in a different financial context and climate. So of course, it's timely to have another look at that. There are other changes as well coming forward in the waste industry, which will impact on both Veolia and Shropshire Council in terms of some new legislation on the horizon around expectations of manufacturers taking responsibility for the packaging that they produce and the reduction, therefore, of that packaging or recycling through other routes. So there's lots of things coming forward that are likely to impact on both Veolia and Shropshire Council, and that gives an opportunity for us to talk to them about a different approach, some different areas of the contract that we could amend. It is a very sort of well sewn up contract as things stand at the moment, so we are going through a whole series of areas of it where we are proposing to them that there could be a different way of working together that would benefit both parties and therefore is worthwhile us engaging in. So yes, just to confirm that is work that it's in hand. Nothing to report yet in terms of specific outcomes, but we'd be happy to come back at a future meeting, perhaps to give an update on progress with that.
Thank you.
Could I just ask that those gentlemen, as the cabinet portfolio holder, responsible to bring the report to the next meeting of this, that goes precisely on the question of the renegotiation of the contract for SLED.
So Alan, thanks. This has been going on for the last 18 months. It started with last year when we had the savings to make. So Tim Smith at that stage was involved very closely with Veolia. We've also now, our contract manager used to work for Veolia, so we've got a good insight, and he's been very useful in looking at it from both angles. So he's had the experience of working with them and knowing how their system works, and that's been beneficial. And we have had, I can't remember off the top of my head, we have had a refund from them this year, which will help to, which will be a great help. And we've also, in the last year, on the back of the stuff from PricewaterhouseCoopers, etc., we have had our first payment from the energy, which we hadn't had before, but now that's, we're now starting to build up these paybacks that weren't obvious before, but we are starting to get them back. But I think it's good. We're constantly holding them to account, and as you know, as far as how it compares with other local authorities, I mean, it's not just a demographic; it's a scale, and this you know, we're sending vehicles all over a large geographical area. Somebody compared it to Telford recently. Well, you know, Telford isn't much bigger than what Shrewsbury and Atcham would have been, whereas we've got North Shropshire, South Shropshire added into that as well. So there are, it's comparing apples with oranges, really.
Okay.
Well, it would have been nice to have seen more information about those renegotiations within this strategy. Because reducing the cost is, you know, we can look at that through with stringent negotiation with the other and hopefully good.
Thank you, Alan. Always the problem with this county, isn't it? The demographics, the size, etc. No matter what we do. Nick Ignat, followed by Rob and Roger.
Thank you, just a couple of points I want to make. In the report, it is quite right, educating the public's vital to achieving less food waste, and it's much better than composting it if we can educate them to use everything that they buy in the first place. I think maybe the answer partly to the education is using parish and town councils, and I think they're ideally placed to take this further with residents. I mean, the village where I live, we have a really good parish newsletter that goes to every single household. And I think if parish council can get on board, or if Shropshire Council can encourage parish and town councils, I think that would help. Size of gardens, yeah, I know constituents that have got half-acre gardens. They're using 3 green bins at the moment, for instance. Yes, they've got compost heaps and that sort of thing, but they use their compost heaps for grass cuttings and weeds and stuff that will compost. What they put in their green bins is branches, twigs, and stuff that would take years to compost, so it's difficult to say how they could manage without less bins. The other thing I wanted to question is how much we can influence things that are effectively out of the council's control. Business waste collected by other contractors, for instance. And if I can just use my business as an example, I don't use Veolia, I use somebody that transports the waste out of the county. But one thing that I have found is that 2 of my suppliers in the last 12 months have sacked all their van drivers and gone over to using deliveries by these parcel firms, which is why we're seeing more and more small white vans driving around. One particular firm, I get about 10 or 12 cardboard boxes, big size cardboard boxes, all with packaging in, all with cardboard. And I've noticed that the €3 bins that I've got outside my shop are used a lot more than they're full right to the brim. And I pay per kilo over a certain weight for cardboard collection, and in that way it seems a waste to me. But how much the council can actually influence businesses, if there's anything we can do as a council for the manufacturing side, which was mentioned by Jane a few minutes ago, I think that would help as well. Thank you.
Rob.
Let me come back there. So I think Nick's kind of hit the nail on the head really, but there is only so much that council can do to reduce waste. And I think, as an aside, I think to an extent this strategy is a waste collection strategy. We're trying to collect less waste so it saves us money, rather than necessarily getting to the root of the problem and reducing the waste itself. There is a bit of that, but it seems to be more about how much we collect. This really comes back to the government, and I think my question is, where in our strategy are we lobbying government? Are we lobbying ministers? How many meetings have cabinet members had with our members of parliament on this issue, with ministers? I know the previous government had a deposit return scheme. It was going to bring in about 7 years ago, I think it was meant to come in, and it still hasn't come in. I know the new government has committed to having a deposit return scheme. You go across Europe, every single country, well, not every country, but lots of countries have a deposit return scheme. You pay an extra bit of money on a bottle when you buy it. It goes in the machine. It gives you your £1 back, €1 back, €1 back, and you get a voucher and you go and spend it in the shop. It will massively reduce the actual waste that exists. We're talking about bottles, we're talking about cans. We can't do that as a council, but are we doing that via the March Together partnership? Are we doing that via our social membership of the Westminster Combined Authority? Have we talked to the new MPs in the county? Do we talk to the old MPs? Is this something we actually have gone and done, or are we just now starting to think about it because we need to save some money?
Whoever wants to answer that one. It's probably a normal political question, but
yeah. I'll sort of stay clear of the sort of political points. I will say that policy that's coming down the line is this separate weekly food waste collection. So this is meant to be in place from April 26. It's a commitment made by the previous government. Shropshire's had capital funding towards the infrastructure to put that in place. We've had no clarity yet on the revenue support that the council will be likely to receive. In preparation for that, Shropshire Council has commissioned some studies about how much food waste we're likely to collect and what will the cost of that collection be and what will the environmental impacts of that be. And what we found is, compared to our base model, the cost of collection will be far higher. Basically, it's a new fleet of collection vehicles and a new collection staff, and we're not going to collect that much food waste. So actually, environmentally, it's not a sound sort of policy for Shropshire Council. And I've taken that point to DEFRA and highlighted the kind of work that the Shrewsbury Food Hub have done in terms of the interventions they've helped with households to get them to store food better, to share surplus, and to buy only what they need. There's some very good case study that the Shrewsbury Furniture Scheme have done to say, with the right interventions, they can save households money. And I've put that in a letter to DEFRA to say, actually, you're putting all this money into putting a new collection scheme in place. Wouldn't it be better to address it at source and try and get households to reduce their waste, which benefits them as well through reducing their food bill? So we have sort of embarked on that sort of discussion. I just want to bring in the point about the packaging materials that Councillor Hickner has raised. So coming down the line is new legislation. The acronym is EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. So this is those who place materials onto the marketplace will have an obligation to fund their recovery. So for the materials that we buy from the shops, those brand retailers are going to have to put money into local authority coffers to fund the cost of collection of those materials. So that's coming down the track quite imminently, and the Shropshire Council will get a good return for that. And also the other, and it is mentioned in the strategy, is DRS, the deposit return scheme. So going back to the 70s, where you buy a bottle with a levy on the top of that purchase, and you would get that 10p back when you took that bottle from the shop. That again is coming down the sort of policy pipeline. They were close to implementing it in Scotland, so it had a few setbacks, but I think that's mentioned in the strategy, and is part of the kind of the national policy framework that's changing that will facilitate what we're trying to do. And while I've put in a strategy about a 20% reduction being quite an ambitious target, it's sort of predicated around the fact that it's not just Shropshire Council who will be addressing this. There are national policies that are coming down the line that will help towards reducing waste overall.
Okay, Roger.
Sorry, just quickly, Chair.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Has the Cabinet ever met with MPs on this, ministers on this? Have you lobbied them?
We haven't met with them particularly on this, but we have meetings with the MPs at various stages, not since the last election, but we have had meetings with the MPs in the past, and this will have been brought up, but I can't remember anything substantial coming back from that.
I think that really needs to be done urgently. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Roger.
Thank you, Chair. A number of comments, a number of questions. When the Veolia contract was first negotiated, there was money put aside in order to meet the escalating costs that would occur during the known Veolia contract. And up till about 7 years ago, I think, maybe 8 years ago, there was about £20 million in there. I would admit that I wanted to use some of that in the council's budget, and I was told I couldn't. Then the cabinet came forward 6 years ago, and all that was used to balance the council's budget. So there was money in there originally from the Veolia contract to pay the escalating costs. And then 2-3 years ago, the cabinet budget actually stated £4 million saving from renegotiating the Veolia contract. It appeared in the budget that the cabinet presented for about 2 years, and then PwC came along. And one of the things that, as Councillor Mosley referred to about the task and finish group that was set up, PwC, it was said, using their knowledge, would help renegotiate the Veolia contract and save the money. From the questions and the answers that's been received so far, we don't seem to be making very much headway using the expertise that PwC brought to us. But on the scrutiny report, which is before us today, I note that on page 3 of the strategy, page 23, it states there that 20% reduction in total waste equates to 178 kilograms of waste per household. The strategy assumes the majority of waste will be achieved from the organic waste stream. So 178 kilograms of green waste will no longer be collected. To me, this £1 million that's being raised, and this waste strategy is really to raise the £1 million to help the council's budget. But it goes on, and if one looks almost at the last page there, page 109 of the report, 39 of that, it lists the estimated waste reduction that's going to be gained because of this. I've got some questions concerning it, how these figures have been arrived at. But one comment there that I'm not aware of, foretold commitment on packaging. Is this what was referred to about coming down the line about producer pays? But it says that it's going to save 1,000 tonnes a year. There are other ones there. Reduced Schedule 2 refuse collections, 1,000 tonnes. I'm not sure what that is. Charging for additional waste bins, 750 tonnes reduction. Low food waste, that's the no longer collecting that, I presume, is 1,500 tonnes. But the food waste, of course, will go into the grey bins, which will go into the ground. But I'm also being told that anybody that puts the green waste into the black bin, Veolia will refuse to take it. I don't think that has been made plain to people, that they must not put green waste in the black bin, because Veolia and the black bin will no longer be collected. I think that does it. But also, there's very little reference about the recycling centres. Are they closing for 1 day a week? I would have thought it would. Could the Shrewsbury one especially could do a staying open for 7 days a week due to the volume that is going there and booking to actually access the centre? How much is that going to cost? I see no reference about that. The pieces of paper which are being delivered to residents only gives 4 weeks to actually send in their 50-odd pound to say yes. 4 weeks to it. I've already had 2 phone calls yesterday from residents who cannot use the internet, and as I think Councillor Mosley said, sorry, Julia Evans said, that residents are having a hell of a job trying to contact and make arrangements in order to pay it. Just 4 weeks before they lose their green bin being collected. It's a big glossy leaflet. I don't know how much that costs to produce, but really, I think the whole thing seems to be ill thought out and also so late in coming forward. Really, it needs going forward because it was said that 11,000 homes, 700,000 collected. Only half of that money, as I understand it, can be used in this year's budget. Half will have to go into the next year's financial budget because it goes from October to October. And so that we can't use money from October this year. That's what the finance people tell me. A lot of questions there, Chairman. Oh, and one final one. As Councillor Julia Evans said, equality assessment. I'm amazed that that does not appear here at all. Maybe the Cabinet member can explain some of the questions I've answered, because some of them may not be possible for the officer to answer. But there are a hell of a lot of questions on this strategy that still needs to be asked and scrutinised, which is what we're supposed to be doing today.
Sure, where to go, but we'll start with Mark, probably Jane, and probably Ian.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, I'll address the very simple point that you made at the start. The references to specific figures for specific waste streams and the court hall commitment, that's not in the current strategy. That's in the 2010-2015 waste prevention strategy. So I've shied away from giving specific figures for specific waste streams because that's very difficult to achieve and very difficult to do. So I think, with the greatest respect, I think you've referred there to the strategy that's now is no longer live, as it were. Just briefly touch on the work that's been happening around the HWRC sites, and as part of that commencing discussion around the negotiation of the contract, Veolia have offered to pay to retain those sites open 7 days per week for the initial 6-month period, whilst we put in place the booking system. So Veolia are underwriting that additional cost for keeping all the sites open 7 days a week. We want to gather that data over the 6-month period from implementation to the booking system, and we're hopeful that maybe the booking system, what it's partly designed to do, and the main thrust for implementing it, is to reduce the quantity of business waste that enters that site sort of illegally, as it were. So the sites we provide are for household domestic waste of the public. We know that we get numerous traders, tradesmen, odd jobbers depositing waste at those facilities for which they've paid a fee for doing, and they should be paying for the lawful disposal of that. And it shouldn't be touching Shropshire Council's waste sites, and it shouldn't be funded by the council taxpayers overall, which is the current system.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that?
But, Chairman, can I add just to some of those other questions I raised?
Jane?
Yes, if I can. So there was some of the points that I've picked up there. There was the discussion about PwC's advice on renegotiating the contract. That sort of follows on from Councillor Nellen's comments earlier, that we have indeed had some advice from PwC on contract renegotiation. But we do also now have really expert advice within the council in our own waste management service lead, which is Gavin Waite, who joined the council relatively recently, just over a year ago, and previously worked in a senior capacity at Veolia, and therefore is providing us with absolutely the right advice on contract renegotiation. It has been very important to dive into the detail of the contract. It's a very complex contract. It's got very complex payment mechanisms within it, which is unfortunately very much the way with PFI contracts typically. So it is something that we are actively exploring at the moment. We had a meeting with Veolia relatively recently about this, setting out some of our concerns and some of our expectations, and have asked them to go away and think about some of our proposals. So we are, as I say, actively working on this at the moment, and there is work ongoing there. I think Mark's already picked up on the point around the HRCs. Pleased to say that those are going to remain open for 7 days per week for the time being, certainly. The booking arrangements, the booking system being used is one of Veolia's own. They already have it up and running, so that's not something the council's having to buy in at any additional cost, I'm pleased to say. I note the point about the difficulties with people booking their green bins if they're not on the internet. Our customer services centre have been part of the rollout of the green bin charging, and are absolutely able to help people to make payments by phone if they need to do that. So people should be advised to call our customer services centre, and they will get support there to make sure that they can book a green bin, book the payment of their green bin if that's what they need to do. And lastly, the point about the 11,000 homes, only half of that in this year's budget as it runs from October to October. Yes, that's correct. That is how that would work.
Okay.
Yeah, I've written out a few things. So generally back, the first one about planning, Rob, it is a good point. But obviously when it comes to planning, we have to go with, it can be introduced and we can suggest it, but the planners are under different laws. And if an appeal comes on it, then the council loses out as well. So it's not just as clear cut as we might want it to be because of the planning restrictions, but it's something we should be looking at. I know, Julie, you mentioned about how Dudley and I think it was Wrexham, wherever it was, how much they charge. That's one extreme. If you go down to the south of England, there's I think the Isle of Wight are charging £110 a year, and we've been clear throughout that £56 is the average. So we are on average across that. Parish councils, etc. I think that I know a lot of a lot of town councils in particular, and some parish councils are actively involved with the climate action type stuff. There's a lot of good. I've been to a few of the meetings that are held with. I can't remember the actual name was up, but a lot of them are involved, and I think a lot of the most of the town councils have got their own climate assessment, which it introduces this. So that's going on. But I think it's a communication that's important, and I know Veolia have in the past. It's sort of died away since the pandemic. But doing the education in the schools, I know some of it's picked up. We've had the virtual stuff where they put they bring kids and put the whatever they call that virtual thing, putting your head, and they can see what it's like inside the recycling centre, etc. So I think we have found in the past, if you educate the kids, they tend to bring it home and educate them. But every leaflet, we talk about the leaflets that go out, every leaflet that goes out to tell you of a calendar change or what your calendar has got information about recycling, reusing and waste minimisation on it. So that has been ongoing. It's getting people to read it is clearly the issue. DRS, you've mentioned it was trialled in Scotland, or was the trial in Scotland, it was held back. We talked about the food introduction of compulsory food collections as of 2026. The burdens allowance that was being offered to shops at council was nowhere near what's required, and so Gavin and his team looked at that and went back because it just doesn't meet with the geographical spread that we have to cater for. Packaging was mentioned. Again, something I didn't know until about a year or so ago is black plastic can't be recycled. So pressure being put on onto like sort of some of these shampoo bottles and whatnot that are black, or meat being sold in black packaging because it makes it look better. Things like that have started to be addressed by companies. And on the piece about the drive-throughs, I know that a lot of I know McDonald's, for example, in Market Drayton, I'm sure they do it in other places, they do their area sweeps around the area. Okay, it's only their area, but they do. They have been actively involved in that. I can't speak if that's for them all, but again, that's the sort of thing we should be encouraging. The equality assessment, that's a very good point. We need to look at that. That's we'll take that on. The Pricewaterhouse contract negotiations, we've mentioned that's ongoing, and there has been, as we said, we have already seen some stuff come back from that. But back to, I think you said, Rob, about, is this about waste minimisation or is it about saving money? It's actually both. We have to be clear, we have to save money. Mark's mentioned there about people using household recycling centres. It's a small medium business enterprises who are using it wrongly. It's not only that, most of our recycling centres are on the periphery of the local authority area. So we know that there's a large amount of recycling comes in from Paris, from Cheshire, both Cheshire local authorities, and from Staffordshire. We know that. And I'm sure there's also some of ours goes out, because the average resident doesn't think, am I crossing the border to go to that? They just realise there's a household recycling centre. I wouldn't think they're doing anything wrong. The booking system will help to reduce a lot of that. And when we do know that, I know to go to a Chester recycling centre, you have to show ID when you go in. I know some of them you can't, I was going to say charge, you can't charge, because we didn't look at that, you can't charge, use household recycling centres. But there are a lot of restrictions which have made people come to use ours. So we're replicating that to prevent them coming to use ours, which when it's something like £100 a tonne of waste to go through, there's quite a bit of saving will be made there. So first of all, thank Mark and his team, because they've put a lot of work into this. That's the very reason for having a scrutiny, is to have a look at some of the things, and I think there are some good points that we need to look at: costing, planning, the quality assessment, etc. I can't speak, Roger, for what happened 7, 8 years ago. I'll be honest, that's news to me. I don't know what that was about. But this is clearly about trying to communicate to our residents that we do need to reduce our. Just to throw something out, people don't realise that there's a cost involved in that. The more stuff we throw out, the more expensive it is for the council to deal with. The more we recycle, the better it is for us. So it's getting that point across to residents that we need their help to help us save them money.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to take 3 more questions, please.
If I can come back, one of the questions, and it is what I've been told, and that is that if there is green waste goes into the black bin, you can maybe understand why, but if green waste goes into the black bin will not be emptied. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, and I think, Roger, I'll have a look, but I think that's actually on the infrastructure, it's on the leaflet that's gone out to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, again, 3 more questions, please, and I'll draw them to a close. Nick, Mark 1, Rachel and Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I probably missed it, but I can't see anything in these papers about a consequential increase in fly tipping. Those of us who live in rural electoral divisions will appreciate it's a problem. There's no easy answer to it. It's very difficult to measure it. And I'm certainly not suggesting we have teams of council officers going out, picking it up. But if we make it more difficult for people to get rid of garden waste, I fear the lanes will be even fuller of, garden waste that, they're not going to put in their green bin. Food waste at the moment may be just dumped along the verges and in the hedgerows. It might or might not be picked up by community-minded local people. But I do think we just have to bear that in mind. Going back decades, we improved facilities for people to get rid of waste of all sorts by providing additional capacity, precisely because we did not want people just to dump stuff. And the cost of clearing it up and collecting it can be enormous. But I say I might have missed it, but I can't see anything in this strategy about the possible consequential cost of increasing fly tipping.
And perhaps the question that should have been asked, who picks up the cost of that, Veolia or Shropshire Council?
In most cases where it's fly tipped waste, it's dealt with by our street cleansing contract through Kia and Ida Verde. It's not a cost that falls directly to the Veolia contract. And if it's sort of major sort of fly tipped instances, and I'll be candid here, the majority of fly tipping activities by organised kind of crime, it's not generally householders, it's traders sort of disposing of waste illegally, and we've got other approaches to try and deal with that. But in the case of large fly tipped instances, it's the Environment Agency that are obliged to fund the cost of that removal.
I understand why. Rachel.
Thank you. If I could just ask the clarification, because the initial charge for the garden waste was to be £52, and then, as it says in this report, they increased it by £3 in order to keep all the recycling centres open. And I think there was a release that they were going to close all of them one day a week. So can you just clarify? Are you saying that that's not going to happen now for the first 6 months?
That's correct. So with part of the ongoing discussion with Veolia, they have agreed to underwrite the cost of keeping all of the sites open for 7 days per week for a 6-month period. And that's really to allow the booking system to bed in and to see the impact of that. I mean, part of that, the rationale for the booking system is to squeeze out traders bringing materials there that shouldn't be there. And if I think there's a thought, if that generates a kind of quantum of savings anticipated, maybe we can keep all the sites open 7 days a week longer term. But let's wait and see until we've had that data. Linked to that, the other aspect to it is we have also talked about maybe a closure to the public for 1 day a week, but therefore allowing traders to access those facilities for a charge. So they'll be closed to the public, open on a charge for basis to traders.
So that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
It's not.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Just a couple more things. There's a lot of talk about everyone's going to double bag their green waste and put it into their black bins. And I understand what Roger was saying. What happens if it slips through and it goes to where it has to go to? Is there what financial impact? Does it spoil the rest of the waste? What happens?
Because that's black bin waste, it won't be an issue. It'll be very difficult to police and monitor if it's double bagged up. The crews won't see that. Its destination will be the energy recovery facilities, so it'll just get burnt there. So yes, it means we're paying for that to be burned, but it's not like contaminating a load of recycling, which should have bigger financial impact.
A couple more things, and now that I'll stop. So in Bridge North, we've never had food waste collections. So when those do start, I think some effort needs to be made through various channels to kind of educate people to start doing it. It's not something they've had and then had it removed. They've never had it. So in order to reduce that, I mean, that is because they're just not used, we're not used to, keeping it separate from the rest of our rubbish. The other issue you're talking about, fly tipping, my concern is burning rubbish. When I was a kid, everybody used to burn all their branches and big waste. That's the one thing that I have a concern about, is that rather than fly tipping it, they're just going to burn it.
Last question, did you say you got another one?
That's it. Thank you.
It is what it is. Sorry, I mean, Shropshire Council can't police that, Veolia can't police that, police will police that, and it's just a fact of life, isn't it?
Two very quick ones. I think on the green waste payment, I think it is a very tight time scale that residents are being given. I think consideration should be given to giving a month's grace or something, so that we're not in October suddenly not connected to your green waste bins. I think that needs to be considered. The second thing, and it feels kind of small, but it irks me every time I come to this building. This building is based around disposable cups, disposable bottles. Down the corridor from where we are now, there is a coffee machine that will give you a paper cup. There is a water machine that will give you a plastic cup. There's a vending machine that will give you a plastic bottle. Around this table, I will commend the cabinet member for his reusable bottle. Don't YouTube. But every time we go to a council meeting, there are disposable cups for councillors. Shrewsbury has a really, really, really good cup scheme where you pay £1. Stop Cafe, I'd like to commend them publicly, have now stopped using disposable cups. They will not give you a disposable cup for a takeaway coffee now. You have to either bring your own cup or they'll give you a Shrewsbury cup for £1. I know the founders of that came to the previous leader of the council to present an idea and got no support from him whatsoever. So I think a very quick thing this council could do is eliminate disposable cups from this building. That should be no problem at all. And I think I'd love to see our next full council meeting, 74 Shrewsbury cups lined up on the table outside that can be washed and reused every time. And we promote that scheme. And actually we can start to promote that scheme out to other towns and our other cafes, because it might be small, but this is the leadership of the county, and I think we need to put our own house in order.
Right, well, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and officers, we're here to approve this report. And I'm sure we've all heard this morning that there's probably a lot more questions come out of that can come back at a different time. Mark.
Chair, can I just address one point that was raised?
Yeah, sure.
By Councillor Evans, and I don't think it's been addressed. It was about the ISHA, so the equalities and impact assessment. So in the report that covers the strategy, the equalities officer was engaged with, and there are some formal words within the report about the ISHA that's been done, and actually, because a lot of this is opt-in, it's like a very light touch impact assessment. So that is in there. If I find the exact wording, I think maybe in 410. It was basically not here are the words, sorry, 4.8, councillor. So in the case of the waste prevention strategy itself, a separate stage 1 ISHA screening record is neither warranted nor proportionate at this stage. That was the advice for the equalities officer. Thank you.
Okay.
Steve, can I just make a comment?
You may.
Going forward, do you think we could encourage someone, usually hear my voice, encourage people to shop local, which would do our traders good?
That'd be very nice.
And stop all this plastic cardboard that's coming through when people order online.
As nice as that sounds, I don't think we're ever going to stop that anymore, but it would be nice to do, and we should all shop local anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And nice comment, thank you.
Then before we go through the recommendations, could I add another recommendation to it, that we do take up this issue about the negotiations with Veolia regarding the PFI and the amount of money involved? And could we ask for an additional report at the next meeting on the work stream to receive this report precisely about the negotiation, the higher level of negotiations with Veolia that we've been talking about, which
I think perhaps probably it's something we can discuss on the next item in the work programme, but yes, I agree with that.
Because we're saving £1 million here, supposedly, but it's going to be taken up with additional demands.
Well,
but presumably and it's about waste prevention rather than financial scheme. But I do think it's important to be aware of the potential for renegotiating the contract in terms of additional savings.
I agree with that. I mean, I was brought up, I was going to finish up, but I was brought up where there's money, so we shouldn't lose sight of that. Yeah.
Thanks. Again, a lot of good points, and thanks very much for all those points that have been raised. Rob, just back to the window of opportunity. Yeah, it was tight with, and actually the team who have pulled it together have had to work under a tight time scale to do that, and it has been difficult. There were, and it started on Tuesday, actually not Monday, sorry, Mark. But the first day was tight, and when I went to book mine, I got a thing saying no, nothing to do. I can't remember exactly what the word, but no option available. But when I rang back through to the officers and said, try again, some of the address on, and went through. So I know people had that issue initially. What is promising is that there's a lot of people trying, which is promising to see. But on the window as well, remember, yeah, it's the 1st of October. We have said that the next collection will still be collected, but you get a hanger to say collect. So it does actually give you that extra couple of weeks as well, for people to look into. I know there was issue. I was told last night there was issues with the phone number. I've just had an email back to say whatever that I haven't read. I had a chance to really get, but I think there's options given at the phone when the phone in, which some people have been potentially taking the wrong option. If anybody does get onto my permit, a lot of people said don't know what my permit is. When I looked at it, it wasn't as clear cut because it says parking permits, where it should, it should really say permits. But it didn't take me long to work that out. Went into park permits and the garden waste was at the bottom. It's not an ideal situation, but those things are hopefully being overcome as we speak. Lead by example, you're absolutely right, Rob. I mean, I would bring my own thermal mug. But yeah, it's an option that we need to phase out pretty quickly. And I've been to the cafe down beside St Julian's car park, because they got involved with one of our schemes in the past. So yeah, I know the good work that they do. And Rachel, on the food waste, Oswald Street's in the same predicament. Having said, when the food waste comes in, everybody will have to change because we'll go into a separate food caddy. Yeah. So it's going to have an impact on everybody. Thanks.
I will propose we approve this report and go into the work programme for the next part. So we have a seconder on that, please.
Just first, Chair, I think I said earlier that I'd like to see a recommendation that we look into how planning can impact on this waste strategy.
Can we make a note of that? Well, can we bring that up in the work programme? Because I think it's part of that, to be honest. Unless you want to see it in this.
Strategy, but our issue comes from the fact we have lots of houses that are of a size.
I've got a lot to say on that as well, because I've been in planning since 2006, and I've seen a lot happen, and I'm not going to start now. But so we'll can we include that in the report that we discussed planning?
Sorry, I mean, what we've got here is a couple of additional points or recommendations to come out. So one is the recommendation that Alan's made that there's an additional piece of work that's added to the work programme, which will get discussed in the next item, but that's a recommendation we probably need to record, which is a request to make sure that that link between the Veolia contract and work with Veolia and the waste minimisation is considered by the committee at the next meeting. I think that there is potentially a recommendation you could make that the strategy needs to make a link between waste prevention and wider factors, including planning. You don't have to go into the detail of that. That's not your role here. I think you're observing and making that comment that you want to do it. You are making a recommendation on that factor.
I think it needs to be explicit in black and white that we've said that.
So sorry to interrupt. There's this concept of the Shropshire test, isn't there, regarding planning, and which incorporates various environmental requirements in with the application process. Is this another criteria that needs to be put in that Shropshire test, presumably?
Jane.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reference the fact that under the action plan that's part of this strategy, we have as item 4A that we should be keeping existing policies under review to ensure that they are aligned to reduce waste. It doesn't say that those are waste policies, it's actually Shropshire Council policies. So I think that would legitimately incorporate planning policy or indeed any other policies that might have a bearing on waste reduction. So the intention is there in the strategy. It doesn't kind of reference planning specifically, but absolutely that is part of what we would like to do going forward, to sort of find all the opportunities that we can within our broader kind of package of policies at Shropshire, just to make colleagues aware of that.
Do you mean by that you're happy for it to come back to scrutiny for those comments to be looked at?
By all means, but I just believe that the action plan already has the sort of the element in there that would allow us to be picking up these points that scrutiny has provided us with today. But we can provide some more detail on those as we move this forwards. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I've recommended we approve the.
So just one more. I think a very simple thing. Can we make a recommendation that the Shropshire Council across all its sites phases out disposable cups? I think we can take that line from Stop Cafe and actually push that out across the county, that we're no longer giving out these things.
I think that's a very good recommendation. Thank you. So we include that. Gary, did you say?
I'll second
it. Gary's seconding that. Can you vote on it, please? Thank you, everybody. We've got one more item, and then both Gary and I are going to dash up because we're both on holiday right from here. Not together, my lads. Right. Thank you, everybody. Work program. Tom, you're on this one, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of the work program, so this is an additional meeting. So which has been put in place because obviously this is a topic which needed to come through scrutiny. Your scheduled meeting is the 14th of November, and on that meeting, if the committee's in agreement with what's come forward as a recommendation there that Alan raised about further paper on the Bureau contract and updating on what's happening in relation to that, your main items on the next meeting are looking at matters around flooding, river water quality, so picking up the delivery of the action plan and the recommendations that came out of the River Water Quality Task and Finish group, but also picking up within that bigger strategic context, which is the River Severn Partnership, the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme, and really looking at that wider piece. So there's work ongoing at the moment with some members of the Task and Finish group to help inform the scope of that session. In addition on that work programme, you've got follow-up items on new housing developments recommendations which came through this committee and were agreed by Cabinet, and also on the social housing and housing strategy recommendations which started under the former Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee and then were finalised by this committee before they went to Cabinet as well. So November's got a fairly comprehensive or full agenda. And then you've got potentially 2 more planned meetings, although I suspect it'll end up being one at the moment, which is on the 23rd of January. And at the moment, the main topic in your work programme that you agreed in, I think, your meeting in July was communication and early engagement with members on changes to services and plans related to their area. And I think that came through quite strongly in some conversations in this committee, particularly in relation to sort of highways, changes to highways and how that can have effect in particularly more rural areas. But that's what the programme's looking like at the moment. So,
any comments on that, please?
Just very quickly, is 3 hours enough for the November? Because it's quite a lot on the agenda there. Do we need to sort of give members a heads up, maybe to book a 4-hour slot or something?
Most meetings run for a couple of hours. 3 hours is the time to put into the calendar. I think that it depends on how far the conversation goes on. We've got to follow up and things are happening because that's like the best practice. But you're right, the issues around the water quality, and around flooding are substantial. And depending on what comes through in terms of the piece around the update and around what's happening with the earlier contract renegotiations as well. And the implications, I think, for this committee in particular, less on the financial, more on the environmental impact as well of that.
You could do a 2 hour, then have a quarter of an hour break.
Yeah, I think
We've done that on children's before now.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure we will work with colleagues.
just so we know in advance, but then we can put the space in the diaries.
I think,
Yeah, no, yeah, we'll catch up with constituents
and discuss with the chair.
And discuss with the chair and the timing of it. The only other bit was to say you'll have received, following the conversations at this committee in July, you'd identified the questions and asked for more information in relation to carbon reduction. And the report which had gone to Canada on carbon reduction, you should have had invitations to looking at that as a briefing session, which was should have come out. So it's just really the flag.
It's 18th of September.
On the 18th of September. So it's just to really highlight that. As normal, we'll record that and post it. But that's there.
Sorry, Alan. Sorry, Roger, not Alan. Sorry, I'm getting you mixed up.
Jim, not sure how to phrase it. It's meant to be constructive, but with the council's finances as it is, looking at that date, the cabinet will be coming forward with whatever recommendations it wants for the finance strategy for next year. But can we put something about finance and just see where the council is? We'll be over halfway through the year, so the scrutiny committee, under the areas that it covers, it may want to make any comments. I don't know. It's really an open-ended question to see if there's any contributions that need to be made towards the cabinet or whoever is producing the finance.
This is really a decision for the committee as opposed to me. So I mean, if there will be, obviously there's a transmission imprint over the scrutiny committee as well, but it's a decision for the committee, not for me as an officer.
If I can, Chairman, can I make a proposal that it is, depending on the events that happen between now and the new government? I don't know where we're going to go. There's going to be a budget come out, and it may affect some of the areas that this committee looks after.
I think that's quite well made, and again to discuss with the chairman when she's back too. If we need another meeting to do that, we need another meeting to do that. I'm personally, years of doing this job, I've when a meeting is required, you just put one in, end of. Alan.
Yes.
It was me.
You wanted? Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. Again, you look like Alan. Sorry.
Just looking at the work programme, I think I mentioned it last time, a briefing on devolving services to those best placed to deliver them. Town and parish councils will be setting their budgets, beginning to plan to set their budgets soon, and the more information we have that we can share with them. I know some town councils have been in discussions, but my town council has had very little kind of information on what might be coming their way.
Okay.
We'll pick up on the briefings in that short hour. Okay, thank you all. Good. Got the date and time of the next meeting on the agenda, but thank you very much indeed. I think it's very worthwhile. Right. Come on, we're going on holiday.